In a hospital operating room, a nurse quickly cuts away the clothing of a female patient using surgical scissors as the medical team prepares for surgery. Standing nearby is Dr. Adrian Cole, but his thoughts are far from professional. Instead of focusing on the procedure, his gaze lingers on the unconscious woman in a disturbing way. Once the surgery is finished and the staff clears out, the patient remains under anesthesia in her room. Taking advantage of the situation, Dr. Cole sneaks inside. Believing no one will question him, he commits a terrible act against the helpless patient. Even worse, after satisfying his twisted urges, he secretly calls in two colleagues, Dr. Marcus Hale and Dr. Victor Dane, inviting them to take advantage of the unconscious woman as well. The most tragic part is that the patient is not completely unaware. Deep inside, she can feel what is happening, but the anesthesia traps her in a motionless body. She cannot move, scream, or fight back. All she can do is cry silently while her body refuses to respond. After that night, the three doctors grow more arrogant. They continue abusing their power, believing their positions protect them from consequences. Rumors eventually spread throughout the hospital, and many staff members suspect what these men have done. Yet instead of punishment, the opposite happens. One by one, the doctors receive promotions and climb higher in their careers. But time has a way of balancing the scales. 10 years later, on a quiet evening, Dr. Marcus Hale, now the head of the anesthesiology department, is wandering the city looking for a woman to accompany him for the night. A mysterious and incredibly attractive woman walks into the room. Marcus is immediately captivated. But when he tries to touch her, she calmly pushes his hand away. He assumes she is teasing him. What he doesn't realize is that a sharp blade is hidden against her thigh. In a flash, she pulls out the knife and strikes him multiple times. Within moments, Marcus collapses, dying on the spot. When investigators examine the body, the autopsy shocks even the experienced forensic doctor. The victim was stabbed 4 times, and every strike precisely cut a major artery. But the wounds themselves were incredibly small. This means the killer intentionally designed the attack so the victim would bleed slowly, prolonging the pain before death. Detective Daniel Park, the lead investigator, studies the report carefully. He wonders what kind of hatred could lead someone to carry out such a calculated revenge. Before he can fully process the case, another report arrives. A second body has been discovered. This time, the victim is Dr. Victor Dane, now an associate professor at the same hospital. The method of killing is identical. The forensic doctor suggests that the killer must have expert knowledge of human anatomy and remarkable control with a blade. Perhaps even a medical professional. Since both victims worked at the same hospital, Detective Park suspects the murders are connected to someone they wronged in the past. While digging into their history, Park learns that Marcus and Victor had a close third friend, Dr. Adrian Cole, who left the hospital years earlier and now runs a luxurious cosmetic surgery clinic. Park then tracks down a former nursing assistant who worked at the hospital 10 years ago. When the detective mentions the names of the 3 doctors, the assistant's face instantly turns pale. She slowly recalls a horrifying incident that happened a decade earlier involving a young female patient. After hearing the full story, Detective Park becomes convinced. The victim from that terrible night has returned for revenge. To test his theory, Park visits Adrian Cole at his clinic the next day and casually mentions the incident from 10 years ago. For a brief moment, Adrian freezes. But he quickly regains his composure and pretends he has no idea what the detective is talking about. Seeing through the act, Park drops a shocking revelation. He informs Adrian that both of his former colleagues have already been murdered. The doctor immediately becomes furious and orders the detective to leave his office. For Park, that reaction says everything. He decides to set a risky trap. Adrian will be placed under constant surveillance, turning him into bait to draw the killer out. But Adrian proves difficult to monitor. Most nights he jumps from bars to private clubs and shady entertainment spots, making the detective's job exhausting. Finally, one night, the mysterious woman makes her move. Disguised with elegant makeup and wearing a masquerade mask, she sneaks into an exclusive VIP lounge where Adrian is partying. Hiding behind a waiter, she tries to slip into the room unnoticed. But just as she reaches the door, she runs into Detective Park, who is searching the area. Sensing danger, she quickly turns to leave through another path. At that exact moment, Park's rookie partner accidentally bumps into the waiter. A loud clatter echoes across the hallway. A knife hidden inside an ice bucket falls to the floor. Realizing she has been exposed, the woman immediately runs. Park chases her through the corridors and briefly corners her, but she launches a sudden attack that knocks him off balance. By the time he recovers, she has already escaped through the back exit. Later, back at the station, Park studies the surveillance footage repeatedly. Even with the mask, it is obvious the woman is incredibly beautiful. Combined with the distinctive knife left behind, Park becomes more certain than ever. The killer must be the patient from 10 years ago. Soon, the rookie detective discovers a crucial detail in the hospital records. On the exact day of the incident 10 years earlier, only one female patient had been under anesthesia. 7 years ago, that woman legally changed her name to Elena Voss. Using her striking appearance and talent, she eventually rose to fame and became a well-known actress. When Detective Park invites Elena to the station for questioning, her beauty is so striking that even the police chief quietly peeks through the door just to see her. Inside the interrogation room, Park gets straight to the point. He asks Elena whether she knew the two doctors who recently died. She calmly pretends not to recognize their names. Then Park mentions Dr. Adrian Cole, the cosmetic surgery director. This time, she doesn't deny knowing him. After all, Adrian is somewhat famous himself. She simply smiles slightly and begins to speak. Elena calmly explains that she and Dr. Adrian Cole had recently appeared together on a television program. Detective Daniel Park then tries to push the conversation toward the incident from 10 years earlier. But Elena is experienced with the media and interviews. Every answer she gives is vague, carefully balanced between truth and denial. She never confirms anything, yet she never clearly refuses it either. In the end, Park has no legal proof to hold her. Reluctantly, he lets her walk out of the station. With the investigation stuck, Park turns his attention to the murder weapon, a curved tiger claw-style karambit knife. The shop owner who sold it explains that the blade comes from Indonesia and is famous for its accuracy and control. It's commonly used by expert butchers because the curved shape can separate meat cleanly from bone. The word butcher suddenly triggers a memory in Park's mind. Just weeks earlier, a woman had opened a small pork shop beneath his apartment building. One day, he saw her working on a carcass, and her knife technique looked almost surgical. At the time, however, Park hadn't been studying her skills. He had been distracted by her beauty. To be honest, the detective had been so captivated that night, he could barely sleep. He spent hours tossing in bed, replaying the moment in his head until he finally forced himself to relax by counting hundreds of sheep. But now things begin to connect. The curved blade, the precise cutting skills, and the body shape that matched the masked attacker from the nightclub. Detective Park doesn't believe in coincidences. After work, he decides to visit the butcher shop. However, just before entering, he bumps into an elderly woman with snow-white hair. As she passes by, a faint scent of perfume drifts through the air. For some reason, the smell feels strangely familiar, though Park can't remember why. Shaking off the thought, he walks into the shop. But the moment he steps inside, his professional focus complete. He disappears. The shop's layout, the hanging cuts of meat, even the counter somehow remind him of the owner's striking figure. His mind drifts into embarrassing daydreams. Then suddenly, the woman herself appears. Startled, Park jumps so hard that he almost forgets why he came. Flustered and awkward, he ends up buying an entire pig's head just so he has an excuse to leave. The next day, he passes by the shop again. He is still suspicious, but after the humiliation of yesterday, he has no intention of going inside. As he turns away, a voice suddenly calls out behind him. "Why are you standing in front of my shop like that?" The butcher is staring at him suspiciously. Park quickly explains that he's actually a detective, but she isn't impressed at all. Instead, she assumes he's some kind of strange stalker and even threatens to call the police. Park is left speechless and far too embarrassed to question her properly. Frustrated, he decides to pressure Adrian Cole again. When Park visits the clinic, he doesn't bother being polite this time. Knowing exactly what kind of person the director is, he openly mocks and insults him throughout their conversation. Cole becomes furious, shouting that he doesn't need police protection. But the moment Park actually leaves the office, the doctor's confidence collapses. Fear takes over as he begins imagining that the mysterious killer could appear at any moment. Under this intense stress, his mind slowly starts unraveling. One day during surgery, he suddenly hallucinates that the patient lying on the operating table is the same girl from 10 years ago. When the nurse briefly leaves the room to fetch water, his old disturbing impulses resurface, and he reaches toward the unconscious patient. Fortunately, the nurse returns just in time and stops him. But his behavior doesn't improve. Instead, he begins harassing the nurse, using his authority to silence her complaints. What he doesn't realize is that consequences are already closing in. Later that night, as he drives into his garage, the lights flicker strangely. Already nervous, Cole looks around anxiously. Hidden in the darkness, the assassin prepares to strike. But at that exact moment, Cole's daughter and a security guard suddenly appear, forcing the attacker to retreat. Still, the assassin doesn't give up. Late that night, she sneaks into the house and finally corners him. By the time Detective Park receives the emergency call and arrives, Cole has already been rushed to the hospital. He survives the attack only because doctors managed to perform an emergency blood transfusion. However, during the struggle, Cole managed to stab the attacker in the thigh. For Park, that small detail becomes a crucial lead. Immediately, he heads back to the butcher shop. Pretending to be a customer again, he casually orders meat while secretly observing the woman. He wants to question her properly, but standing in front of someone so attractive makes the normally confident detective completely lose his composure. Instead of interrogating her, he keeps inventing excuses to buy more pork. Just as he's about to leave, he notices something. She is limping slightly. Park's suspicions ignite instantly. To confirm his theory, he decides to take a risky step. He stalls for time, waiting for the perfect moment. Then suddenly, he grabs her arm and pulls her onto the table, lifting the edge of her skirt just enough to check. There it is. A fresh wound on her thigh. Realizing she has been exposed, the butcher's demeanor changes instantly. Her expression softens, her voice lowers, and she begins speaking to him in a seductive whisper. Looking into her mesmerizing eyes, Park finds his resolve melting away. Despite everything, he struggles to resist her charm. But while the detective is distracted, something disastrous is unfolding elsewhere. Back at the hospital, the mysterious assassin silently takes down the guards within seconds. She straps the injured Adrian Cole into a wheelchair and escapes with him using a stolen ambulance. By the time Park receives the alert and rushes to the hospital, the director has completely disappeared. Security footage later shows a woman pushing the wheelchair through the corridor, and her body shape perfectly matches the previous attacker. But there's one huge problem. At the exact moment the kidnapping happened, the butcher woman was still with Detective Park, which means she couldn't possibly be the attacker. With her alibi confirmed, Park finally lets go of his suspicions. Relieved, he returns to her shop after work and falls deeper into her embrace. Meanwhile, somewhere far from the city lights, Adrian Cole wakes up tied tightly to a chair inside a filthy slaughterhouse. Panic floods his mind as he screams for help, his voice growing hoarse while begging for mercy. The heavy door creaks open. An elderly woman with a hunched back slowly walks into the room, leaning on a cane. Cole desperately pleads with her to untie him, promising money and anything else she wants. But the old woman simply stares at him with icy indifference. Without warning, another figure rushes forward from the shadows. A blade flashes in the dim light. With terrifying precision, the attacker slices into Cole's arms and legs, exactly the same method used on the previous two victims. Each strike targets a vital artery, ensuring the wounds will bleed slowly. Cole gasps weakly as his strength drains away. The old woman leans close and whispers into his ear. "I've waited my entire life to punish people like you." The words trigger a horrifying memory buried deep in his mind, the crime from 10 years ago. Fear spreads across his face as realization dawns. The old woman suddenly strikes him twice with her cane before ripping away his pants. Confused and terrified, Cole has no idea what she's about to do. Then a large hunting dog is released into the room. Only at that moment does he understand his fate. But it's far too late. As the slaughterhouse falls silent again, the old woman tosses her cane aside. Slowly, she removes her glasses and then peels away a hyper-realistic mask. Beneath the disguise is Elena Voss, the famous actress and the victim from 10 years ago. For an entire decade, she has been patiently planning her revenge. The next morning, Daniel Park wakes up in the butcher woman's bed. Moments later, the news breaks. Adrian Cole has been found dead. Park jumps up immediately and prepares to rush to the crime scene. But the butcher teasingly tries to pull him back for a little longer. Unfortunately for her, This is still a murder investigation. Park has no choice but to leave. As he walks out the door, the butcher looks like she wants to say something important, but she remains silent. At the morgue, the forensic doctor notices something unusual. Although all three doctors were killed with the same curved blade, the stabbing patterns reveal something new. The first two murders were clearly done by a right-handed attacker, but the final killing was carried out by someone left-handed. This means at least two different killers were involved. Park feels his heart sink. Could the woman he fell in love with actually be part of it? Later that day, Park and his partner are eating in a small diner when a television broadcast catches his attention. A trailer for Elena Voss's newest movie appears on the screen. In the film, she plays a vengeful old woman. When Park sees her in the heavy makeup and costume, his body freezes. It's the exact same old lady he bumped into outside the butcher shop. And suddenly, he remembers the perfume. It was the same scent Elena wore during her interrogation. Everything finally clicks. Elena is the mastermind. Her late-night visits to the butcher shop weren't about buying meat. She had been meeting the assassin, the butcher woman Park had fallen for. And the final murder? That was Elena's work. The butcher had been injured during the earlier attack and couldn't move easily. Meanwhile, she was with Park, providing the perfect alibi. So Elena disguised herself, kidnapped Adrian Cole from the hospital, and finished the revenge herself. Because Elena is left-handed, the wound patterns changed. The theory makes perfect sense. But without evidence, it's still only a theory. When Park rushes back to the butcher shop, he finds it completely empty. The woman is gone. Her phone has been disconnected. The sudden disappearance only strengthens his suspicions. Park calls Elena back to the police station for one final interrogation. But the actress remains calm and composed. She knows the detective has no real proof.
No weapon. No witness. No confession.
Without evidence, the police can't touch her. She even threatens to sue the department for harassment. Under pressure from his superiors, Park is forced to release her. Defeated, Park locks himself inside his apartment for days. He begins doubting himself as a detective. But even worse, he can't stop thinking about the beautiful butcher who deceived him. Then one day, a news report grabs his attention. A notorious human trafficker has been murdered in another city. The method of killing is identical to the doctor's murders. Park's instincts reignite immediately. He travels to the city and begins investigating. After several days of searching, he finally finds something familiar. A newly opened pork shop. And standing inside it is the woman he hasn't been able to forget. Park confronts her directly. Everywhere a murder happens, you open a new butcher shop. That's not a coincidence, is it? The tension explodes. The two begin fighting fiercely inside the shop. Although the butcher is skilled and fast, Park eventually manages to pin her to the ground. But as he looks down at her face, something inside him breaks. He realizes he can't bring himself to arrest her. Back home, Park walks into the police station and submits his resignation. If he can't bring criminals to justice, he no longer feels worthy of the badge. Now a civilian, he returns to the butcher shop. This time, the conflict between them turns into something very different. After a long night together, Park wakes up late the next afternoon. As he reaches for his phone, he accidentally knocks a photo album from a drawer. Curious, he flips through the pages. Then his heart suddenly stops. Among the photos is a picture showing that the butcher woman has an identical twin sister. In that moment, everything becomes clear. Elena Voss was the mastermind who planned the revenge. But the person who kidnapped Adrian Cole from the hospital and carried out the final murder wasn't Elena. And it wasn't lying beside Park either. It was her twin sister, the left-handed killer. Park slowly closes the album. As he looks at the woman sleeping peacefully beside him, he realizes something strange. At this point, the truth no longer matters. Because sometimes, justice and love exist in very complicated shades of gray.